The grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with the usual mix of languages, breathing apparatus, and the soft hum of translation devices. Representatives from 300 worlds sat in their designated sections, each group adapted to their species' environmental needs. The Zephyrians floated in their atmospheric bubbles, the crystalline Vorthak pulsed with soft blue light, and the reptilian SS Katar coiled comfortably on heated platforms. At the center of it all stood the Council's most prestigious speaker podium, where today's session would address what many considered the most embarrassing military failure in galactic history. The invasion of a small, backwater planet called Earth had gone so spectacularly wrong that 3 separate battle fleets had retreated in defeat. Admiral Kethvar of the Dominion Empire approached the podium with heavy steps. His 4 arms hung at his sides, and his normally proud military bearing seemed deflated. The scars across his gray-green hide told stories of countless victories, but today he would speak only of defeat. Honorable Council members, Kethvar began, his voice carrying across the chamber through the translation matrix. I stand before you to report on Operation Swift Victory, the joint military action against the planet designated as Sol 3, locally known as Earth. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Confederation of Free Worlds had initiated this invasion after Earth's inhabitants had somehow destroyed one of their research vessels. What should have been a simple punishment raid had turned into something far more complicated. The initial intelligence reports suggested a primitive civilization, Kethvar continued. Their technology appeared to be in early spaceflight development. Chemical rockets, basic satellites, simple nuclear weapons. Standard procedure called for a show of force followed by immediate surrender. Chancellor Yxera, a tall, ethereal being from the Centauri Collective, leaned forward in her seat. Admiral, please describe the first contact attempt. Kethvar's mandibles clicked nervously. We transmitted the standard surrender ultimatum in their dominant languages. The response was unexpected. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background chatter of various species ceased. The humans, Kethvar said the word as if it left a bad taste in his mouth, responded with what our linguists initially classified as aggressive posturing. Phrases like come and, take it and, Molenlebe and, something they called nuts in response to surrender demands. We assumed this was typical primitive bravado. Surely you proceeded with the standard intimidation protocol, asked Representative Throck, his massive form shifting on reinforced seating designed for his boulder-like species. We did. Kethvar activated a holographic display showing Earth's third moon. We demonstrated our planet-cracking weaponry by destroying their smaller satellite. The energy discharge was visible from their surface. Any rational species would have immediately sued for peace. The hologram shifted to show intercepted human communications from that time period. Text messages, video calls, and news broadcasts played simultaneously across multiple screens. Their response was to mobilize their entire planetary military, Kethvar said. But, more concerning were the civilian communications we intercepted. Instead of panic and demands for surrender, we found messages like finally, something interesting is happening and time to show these aliens how Earth does business. A collective intake of breath echoed through the chamber. Several representatives exchanged worried glances. The invasion fleet consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, 48 destroyers, and 300 assault craft, Kethvar continued. Standard overwhelming force doctrine. We expected complete planetary subjugation within 72 hours. And, instead, prompted Chancellor Yxera. Kethvar paused, his 4 hands clenching and unclenching. Instead, we encountered the most terrifying military response in recorded galactic history. The holographic display changed to show the first wave of human fighters. They were crewed by galactic standards, using chemical propulsion and primitive weapons. But there were thousands of them, and they moved with a coordination that defied explanation. The humans launched everything they had, Kethvar said. Not just their military spacecraft, but converted civilian vessels, modified cargo ships, even what appeared to be recreational aircraft fitted with improvised weapons. Our tactical computers couldn't process the chaos. Representative Zilkorth, speaking through her mechanical translation unit, asked, "Surely your superior technology provided adequate advantage?" "That's what we assumed." Kethvar's display showed footage from the first engagement. Our weapons were indeed superior. Our ships were faster and more maneuverable. Our shields could absorb anything they threw at us. But the humans did something we never anticipated. The chamber waited in complete silence. They didn't fight fair. A wave of confusion swept through the assembly. The concept of unfair fighting in warfare was alien to most species, who followed established protocols of engagement that had developed over millennia of galactic conflict. While our ships engaged their fighters in the outer atmosphere, Kethvar continued, human teams infiltrated our assault craft using some kind of primitive rocket-powered suits. They didn't try to overwhelm our shields or outmaneuver our weapons. They physically boarded our ships and fought hand-to-hand inside our corridors. The display showed security footage from inside a Dominion destroyer. Armored humans moved through the ship's passages, using everything from explosive devices to simple metal bars as weapons. They moved with a fluidity and aggression that seemed impossible for such a young species. "How many casualties?" asked Chancellor Yixera quietly. "The first engagement alone cost us 8 destroyers and 14 assault craft," Kethvar replied. "But the casualty reports from inside those ships." He paused, collecting himself. "The humans didn't just defeat our boarding parties. They adapted to our internal atmospheres, figured out our ship layouts in real time, and turned our own defensive systems against us." Representative Quell, her insectoid form trembling slightly, clicked out a question. "What were their loss ratios?" "That's the most disturbing part." Kethvar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "For every human casualty, they seemed to become more dangerous, not less. They didn't retreat when faced with superior numbers. They didn't surrender when surrounded. They just kept fighting harder." The holographic display showed intercepted human military communications during the battles. Voices remained calm and professional even as explosions rocked their ships around them. Pilots with damaged craft continued attacking until their vessels literally fell apart. Ground crews worked under fire to launch more fighters, treating the invasion as if it were some kind of sporting event they were determined to win. "The psychological profiles don't make sense," Kethvar continued. "Most species show predictable stress responses under extreme combat conditions. Fear, panic, reduced effectiveness. The humans showed the opposite. The worse their situation became, the more creative and dangerous they got." Chancellor Yixera leaned back in her seat, her ethereal features troubled. "Admiral, I need to understand this clearly. Are you telling this council that a primitive, pre-contact species successfully repelled a full-scale invasion by 3 galactic military powers?" "I'm telling you something worse than that," Kethvar replied. "They didn't just repel us. After destroying 40% of our invasion fleet, they launched a counterattack." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives spoke in dozens of languages simultaneously, creating a cacophony that took several minutes for the moderators to control. "Order! Order!" Chancellor Yixera's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, please continue." The human counterattack consisted of captured Dominion technology retrofitted onto their own vessels. They had somehow reverse-engineered our shield generators and weapon systems in the middle of active combat. Their ships appeared in our staging area 18 hours after the initial invasion began. The display showed impossible footage, crude human spacecraft equipped with clearly alien technology, moving in formation toward the much larger galactic fleet. The size difference was laughable. The human vessels looked like insects attacking a herd of space whales. "What happened next defies military doctrine," Kethvar said. "Instead of engaging our capital ships directly, the humans targeted our support vessels. Fuel tankers, supply ships, communication relays. They crippled our logistics network before we understood what was happening." Representative Throck rumbled a question about casualties. "Minimal, initially," Kethvar admitted. "The humans seemed more interested in disrupting our operations than killing our crews. But that changed when Admiral Zextar ordered the bombardment of their civilian population centers." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. "Admiral Zextar acted without council authorization," Kethvar quickly added. "His decision to target non-combatants violated every galactic warfare convention." But the human response. The display showed orbital bombardment beams striking Earth's surface, followed immediately by a massive surge in human military activity. Ships that had been holding defensive positions suddenly accelerated toward the galactic fleet with obvious intent to ram. "The humans stopped following any recognizable tactical doctrine," Kethvar said. "They began what can only be described as berserker attacks. Ships with damaged weapons systems used themselves as kinetic projectiles. Fighter craft launched coordinated swarm attacks that overwhelmed our point defenses through pure numbers and reckless aggression." "And the outcome?"
Chancellor Yixera asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer.
Total fleet withdrawal after 67 hours of combat, Kethvar announced. Galactic casualties, 42 capital ships destroyed, 118 smaller vessels lost, approximately 20,000 personnel dead or missing. Human casualties, unknown, but they continued fighting effectively until our departure.
The chamber fell into stunned silence.
Never in recorded galactic history had a pre-contact species successfully defended against a coordinated invasion by multiple galactic powers.
Representative Quell clicked nervously. Admiral, in your professional military assessment, what makes these humans so dangerous? Kethvar was quiet for a long moment before answering.
Every other species we've encountered fights to achieve objectives.
Control territory, protect resources, defend populations. The humans fight for the sake of fighting itself.
They treat warfare as an art form, and they're very good artists.
Surely this was an anomaly, suggested Representative Zilkorth.
No species maintains that level of aggression indefinitely. That's what Admiral Brixtal thought when he launched the second invasion 6 months later.
Another wave of shock swept through the assembly. There was a second attempt? Chancellor Yixera asked incredulously.
The hegemony fleet was larger and better prepared, Kethvar explained.
We thought we understood human tactics.
We brought ships specifically designed to counter their boarding strategies, weapons optimized for their technology level, and commanders trained in irregular warfare. The holographic display showed an even larger fleet approaching Earth, this one clearly designed with the lessons of the first invasion in mind. Heavier armor, smaller access ports, internal security systems optimized for repelling boarders.
Admiral Brixtal's plan was textbook counterinsurgency, Kethvar continued.
Establish orbital supremacy, neutralize their space-based assets, then conduct systematic surface operations with overwhelming technological advantage.
I assume this approach was more successful, asked Representative Throck hopefully. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what his species used as a laugh, though there was no humor in it. The humans had spent 6 months preparing for our return. When the hegemony fleet arrived, they found a completely transformed enemy.
The display showed Earth's orbital space, now crowded with defensive platforms, converted asteroids bristling with weapons, and clouds of small craft that moved in patterns too complex for easy analysis. The humans had somehow acquired faster-than-light communication technology, Kethvar revealed.
Not travel, just communication.
They had contacted other species, other worlds. When Admiral Brixtal arrived, he found human vessels equipped with technology from a dozen different galactic civilizations.
The silence in the council chamber stretched on as representatives processed Admiral Kethvar's revelation. Finally, Chancellor Yixera found her voice.
You're telling us that in 6 months, these humans established diplomatic contact with multiple species and acquired advanced technology through trade agreements?
Not trade, Kethvar corrected grimly. Friendship.
The word hung in the air like a foreign concept, which for many species in the chamber, it was. Galactic politics typically revolved around resource allocation, territorial agreements, and strategic partnerships. The notion of species forming alliances based on personal affinity was almost unheard of. Admiral Brixtal's intelligence reports are still classified, Kethvar continued, but I can share the general findings. The humans had somehow convinced the Yalari Confederacy to provide them with shield technology, the Nexus Collective had shared their quantum communication systems, and the nomadic Kethmari had taught them advanced metallurgy. Representative Zilkortha's mechanical translator crackled with static as she processed this information. The Kethmari haven't shared their metallurgy techniques with anyone in 3,000 years.
How did primitives convince them to break that tradition?
According to intercepted communications, Kethvar activated another holographic display. The humans didn't ask for technology.
They offered entertainment.
The display showed a recording from what appeared to be a human military briefing room. A woman in simple clothing stood before a mixed group of humans and several distinctly alien beings. She was speaking animatedly, using hand gestures to illustrate some kind of story, while the aliens watched with obvious fascination. The humans have something we've never encountered before, Kethvar explained. They create fictional narratives for pure enjoyment. Stories with no practical purpose beyond emotional engagement. The Kethmari found these stories so compelling that they voluntarily shared their most guarded secrets in exchange for more. The chamber buzzed with confused discussion. Most galactic species created educational content, technical manuals, and historical records.
The concept of deliberately fabricated narratives designed purely for entertainment was genuinely alien to the assembled representatives. The second invasion fleet was twice the size of the first, Kethvar continued.
48 capital ships, 200 destroyers, and over 1,000 assault craft. Admiral Brixtal had studied every available recording from the first engagement and believed he had developed effective counter-tactics.
And prompted Chancellor Yxera, though her tone suggested she expected another tale of defeat. The humans had prepared welcome gifts. The holographic display shifted to show the moment Admiral Brixtal's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Instead of the desperate defensive preparations they expected to find, the human fleet was arranged in what appeared to be a formal reception formation. Our first indication that something was wrong came when the humans broadcast a greeting message in perfect hegemony high command dialect, Kethvar said. Not the simplified trade language most species learn for basic communication, but the formal military protocol used only in official ceremonies. The audio played through the chamber's speakers. A human voice spoke in flawless hegemony syntax, following proper military courtesy protocols with precision that suggested extensive cultural study. Admiral Brixtal of the Hegemony Second Fleet, you are welcome in the solar system. Please accept these gifts as tokens of respect for worthy opponents.
Gifts?
Representative Quell clicked nervously.
The humans launched unarmed cargo pods toward our fleet, Kethvar explained.
Admiral Brixtal almost ordered them destroyed, but his curiosity was aroused.
When we opened the pods, we found examples of human food preparation, manufactured goods, and something called music. The display showed confused hegemony soldiers examining small devices that produced organized sound patterns. Several alien crew members were shown experimenting with what appeared to be human musical instruments, their faces showing expressions of wonder and delight. The psychological warfare implications were immediately apparent, Kethvar continued. Instead of inspiring fear or intimidation, the humans had somehow made themselves appear likable.
Chancellor Yxera leaned forward. How does one weaponize likability? Admiral Brixtal discovered that when he began receiving individual communications from human vessels, Kethvar replied.
Not military transmissions, but personal messages. Crew members introducing themselves, asking about hegemony culture, sharing information about Earth customs. Within hours, our personnel were actively engaged in cultural exchange with the enemy. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The concept of individual soldiers conducting personal diplomacy during military operations violated every known protocol of warfare.
Order! Chancellor Yxera called. Admiral, please continue.
The humans had somehow identified specific crew members aboard our ships and were sending customized messages based on individual interests, Kethvar explained. Engineers received technical discussions about propulsion systems, medical officers got information about human biology, even food preparation specialists received recipes adapted for various species' dietary requirements.
Representative Throck rumbled a question about operational security.
That was Admiral Brixtal's primary concern, Kethvar agreed. He ordered communication blackout protocols, but the damage was already done. Our crews were psychologically compromised. Half of them were more interested in continuing conversations with humans than conducting military operations. The display showed internal hegemony security footage of crew members gathered around communication stations, eagerly waiting for the next human transmission. Several aliens were shown attempting to prepare human food recipes using ship supplies, while others practiced producing the organized sound patterns they had learned were called songs. When Admiral Brixtal finally ordered the attack to begin, Kethvar continued, he discovered the humans' second surprise. They had been using the cultural exchange period to map our fleet composition, identify our tactical weaknesses, and prepare customized countermeasures for every class of vessel we brought. Intelligence gathering disguised as friendship, Representative Zilkorth observed. Worse than that, Kethvar corrected. The intelligence gathering was genuine friendship. Our psychological analysis indicates the humans weren't pretending to be interested in our cultures. They actually were interested. They simply happened to be gathering tactically useful information while pursuing genuine curiosity about our species.
The concept left many representatives struggling to understand.
Most galactic species compartmentalized military and social interactions. The idea of simultaneously conducting warfare and diplomacy through the same conversations was beyond their tactical comprehension.
The actual combat phase lasted only 18 hours, Kethvar announced.
Not because the humans defeated us quickly, but because Admiral Brixtal couldn't maintain unit cohesion. His own crews were refusing to target human vessels whose crews they had been talking to for days.
Chancellor Yixera sat back in her seat, looking stunned. You're telling this council that the humans neutralized our second-largest invasion fleet through conversation?
They neutralized our invasion fleet by making us like them, Cathvar clarified. By the time combat began, 30% of our personnel had requested transfer to cultural exchange duties, and another 40% were operating at reduced effectiveness due to emotional conflict about fighting beings they had begun to consider friends. The display showed the chaotic final hours of the second invasion attempt. Human and hegemony vessels moved in complex patterns that looked more like an elaborate dance than a military engagement. Weapons fire was sporadic and largely ineffective, with both sides appearing more interested in avoiding casualties than achieving victory.
Admiral Brixtal ultimately ordered withdrawal when his own flagship crew presented him with a petition requesting permission to formally establish diplomatic relations with Earth, Cathvar revealed. Signed by 84% of his personnel, including most of his senior officers. Representative Quell's clicking intensified. What happened to Admiral Brixtal? He was reassigned to cultural affairs, Cathvar replied.
Last reports indicate he's working on a comprehensive analysis of human social warfare techniques for the Hegemony Strategic Command.
And the third invasion? Chancellor Yixera asked, though she seemed almost afraid to hear the answer. Cathvar's posture shifted, becoming somehow more defensive.
The third invasion was my operation. The Alliance High Command believed that the first two failures were due to inadequate preparation and poor tactical leadership.
They authorized me to assemble the largest military force in Alliance history. The holographic display showed an impressive fleet composition chart.
300 capital ships, over 1,000 destroyers, and support vessels numbering in the thousands. The assembled force represented more military might than had been deployed in any single operation during the last galactic war. The plan was to overwhelm Earth's defenses through pure numerical superiority, Cathvar explained. No cultural exchange, no extended communications, no opportunity for psychological manipulation. Immediate orbital bombardment followed by systematic ground operations. Surely that approach was more successful, asked Representative Throck hopefully. The humans were ready for us, Cathvar said simply. The display changed to show Earth's solar system as it appeared when the Alliance fleet arrived. The small system had been transformed into a fortress. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every planet, asteroid mining operations had created clouds of defensive debris, and the space between worlds bristled with defensive installations. But the most shocking discovery was waiting for us at the system's edge, Cathvar continued. A reception committee.
More gifts? Chancellor Yixera asked weakly.
Better than gifts, Cathvar replied. They brought friends. The display expanded to show the full scope of what the Alliance fleet had encountered. Surrounding Earth's system was a defensive fleet composed of vessels from dozens of species. Yulari shield ships, Kathmari heavy cruisers, Nexus communication arrays, and dozens of other designs from across the galaxy. The humans had somehow convinced half the minor species in known space to actively defend their world, Cathvar announced. Not through threats or coercion, but through genuine alliance agreements.
The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear.
Earth had accomplished in under 2 years what most galactic powers took centuries to achieve, a network of voluntary military alliances spanning multiple sectors of space.
How? Representative Zilkorth finally asked.
The same way they neutralized Admiral Brixtal's fleet, Cathvar replied.
They made everyone like them.
But, more than that, they made everyone like each other. The holographic display showed recordings from what appeared to be massive social gatherings. Humans mixed freely with dozens of alien species in what looked like celebration events. Music, food, games, and conversation flowed between beings who had never previously met. The humans had created something unprecedented in galactic history, Cathvar explained. A social network spanning multiple species, based entirely on voluntary participation and mutual enjoyment of each other's company. And, militarily, prompted Chancellor Yixera. I ordered immediate withdrawal after our advance scouts reported the defensive composition, Cathvar admitted. Fighting Earth would have meant engaging in combat with 46 different species simultaneously. The tactical complexity alone would have been impossible to manage, even setting aside the political implications of attacking nearly a quarter of the galaxy's civilizations. The chamber erupted in stunned discussion. Representatives spoke rapidly in their native languages, translation devices struggling to keep pace with the flood of commentary.
Order! Order! Chancellor Yixera called. When quiet returned, she asked the question that was obviously troubling everyone. Admiral, in your professional assessment, what exactly are these humans? Kethvar considered the question carefully before answering.
They're the most dangerous species we've ever encountered, and they achieve that status without firing a shot in anger.
Explain.
Every other species in known space fights for resources, territory, or ideology, Kethvar said.
The humans fight for the right to be friends with everyone. And, apparently, they're willing to destroy anyone who tries to prevent that.
The council chamber remained in a state of controlled chaos for several minutes before Chancellor Yixera could restore order. Representatives from across the galaxy struggled to process the implications of Admiral Kethvar's report. The idea that a primitive species had somehow created the largest voluntary alliance in galactic history was difficult to accept.
Admiral, Chancellor Yixera began once quiet returned, I need you to clarify something for the council. When you say the humans are willing to destroy anyone who tries to prevent friendship, what exactly do you mean?
Kethvar activated a new holographic display showing intercepted human communications from the period following the third invasion attempt. The psychological profiles we developed during our extended observation period reveal something unprecedented. Most species become more defensive and isolationist after military threats. The humans become more aggressively social.
The display showed Earth's orbital space in the months after the Alliance withdrawal.
Instead of fortifying their defenses, the humans had constructed massive space stations clearly designed for hosting large gatherings.
Vessels from dozens of species could be seen docking simultaneously at these facilities.
They built what they call party platforms, Kethvar explained. Facilities capable of accommodating the environmental needs of every known spacefaring species, designed specifically for social interaction on an unprecedented scale.
Representative Quell clicked nervously. They weaponized hospitality?
They turned hospitality into a strategic doctrine, Kethvar corrected. Our intelligence analysis indicates that human diplomatic strategy follows a pattern: first contact through cultural exchange, followed by friendship establishment, then integration into their social network, and, finally, alliance formalization through shared celebration events.
Chancellor Yixera leaned forward. And, species actually agree to this process? Not just agree, Kethvar replied grimly. They compete for human attention.
We've intercepted communications from 14 species offering military support to Earth in exchange for inclusion in their galactic friend network. The implications sent a wave of concerned murmurs through the chamber. If human influence continued expanding at its current rate, the existing power structure of galactic politics could be completely disrupted within a few decades. Show them the cultural contamination reports, suggested Representative Throck, his massive form shifting uncomfortably in his reinforced seating.
Kethvar nodded and changed the display to show a galaxy-wide map marked with spreading areas of color. Human cultural influence has been expanding exponentially since first contact.
Species that establish regular communication with humans begin adopting human social practices within months.
What kind of practices? Asked Representative Zilkorth suspiciously.
Recreational activities, Kethvar replied. Organized games with no productive purpose, musical performance for entertainment rather than communication, and, most concerning of all, the creation of fictional narratives designed purely for emotional enjoyment. The chamber buzzed with confused discussion.
Most representatives had never encountered the concept of purposeless entertainment.
The Yulari Confederacy has officially designated 3 days per week for fun time based on human recommendations, Kethvar continued.
The Nexus Collective has established recreational facilities on every world in their territory. Even the notoriously practical Kethmari have begun incorporating story circles into their traditional metalworking ceremonies. And the military implications? Chancellor Yixera asked, clearly dreading the answer. Catastrophic for traditional warfare doctrine, Kethvar admitted.
Species exposed to human social practices become increasingly reluctant to engage in military action against anyone they consider a friend.
Since humans consider everyone a potential friend, this effectively neutralizes them as military assets against Earth. The display showed force composition analyses from across the galaxy. Military units from human-influenced species showed dramatically reduced effectiveness ratings when tasked with operations against other human-allied civilizations. We've also documented something called empathy cascade, Kethvar added.
When humans integrate a new species into their social network, that species begins extending friendship to other human allies, expanding the network exponentially.
Representative Quell's clicking had become almost frantic. How do we stop this expansion? The chamber fell silent as the implications of that question became clear.
Military action against Earth would now mean fighting a significant portion of the galaxy's civilizations.
Economic sanctions would be impossible to enforce with so many species voluntarily supporting human trade. Even diplomatic isolation was impossible when humans had become the galaxy's primary social coordinators. Admiral, Chancellor Yixera asked carefully, has your analysis identified any weaknesses in human strategy that could be exploited? Kethvar was quiet for a long moment before answering.
There's one possibility, but it would require unprecedented cooperation between the major powers.
Explain. Human influence spreads through direct personal contact, Kethvar said.
Their ability to form emotional connections with other species appears to be their primary strategic advantage.
If we could somehow prevent direct contact between humans and uncontacted species, we might be able to limit their expansion.
A quarantine, suggested Representative Throck.
Exactly. A coordinated blockade maintaining human isolation within their current sphere of influence. Kethvar activated a tactical display showing potential quarantine boundaries.
It would require the largest sustained military operation in galactic history, but theoretically possible.
Chancellor Yixera studied the display carefully. What would be the resource requirements?
Approximately 60% of all galactic military assets, Kethvar replied. Continuous patrol schedules across 47 sectors, permanent monitoring of all communication channels, and interdiction of any vessels attempting to reach human-controlled space. The chamber erupted in debate as representatives calculated the cost of such an operation. The economic impact would be devastating, requiring unprecedented cooperation between species that had been rivals for millennia.
And the probability of success? Chancellor Yixera asked when order returned. Kethvar's mandibles clicked nervously. Unknown. We've never attempted to quarantine a social movement before. Traditional containment doctrine assumes the threat wants to remain isolated.
The humans actively seek contact with new species.
They might consider quarantine an act of war.
Would that improve our tactical position? Asked Representative Zilkorth.
No, Kethvar replied immediately. Human military doctrine becomes more dangerous when they're angry.
During our invasion attempts, they were merely defending themselves.
If we threaten their ability to make friends across the galaxy, we might face them in full aggressive mode.
The sobering implications silenced the chamber again.
Admiral, Chancellor Yixera said slowly, describe human aggressive mode. Kethvar activated another display showing intelligence projections rather than recorded footage.
Based on tactical analysis of their defensive operations, we estimate that humans operating in full offensive mode would be approximately 40 times more dangerous than what we encountered during the invasion attempts.
40 times?
Representative Quell's clicking had reached a pitch that was painful for several species in the chamber. Human combat effectiveness scales exponentially with their level of emotional investment, Kethvar explained. When defending their home, they fought efficiently but with restraint.
When protecting friends, they demonstrated significantly increased capability.
If they believe we're threatening their ability to make friends with the entire galaxy, their response would likely be.
Would be what, Admiral? Chancellor Yixera prompted.
Total war, Kethvar said quietly. Not the limited engagement warfare that characterizes most galactic conflicts, but the complete mobilization of their entire civilization for military purposes. Based on their historical records, humans in total war mode remake entire star systems to support their war effort.
The holographic display showed projections of human industrial capacity if fully converted to military production.
The numbers were staggering. Their ability to rapidly adapt and innovate, combined with their growing network of allied species, could produce military assets faster than most civilizations could track them.
They've also demonstrated something we call innovation acceleration under pressure, Kethvar added.
The more difficult their situation becomes, the faster they develop new solutions. A prolonged conflict with humanity might result in technological advancement beyond our ability to counter. Representative Throck rumbled a question about human objectives in such a scenario.
That's the most terrifying aspect, Kethvar replied.
Based on their behavior patterns, human war objectives wouldn't be conquest or resource acquisition.
They would fight to force us to be friends with them. The absurdity of the statement couldn't mask its horrifying implications.
A species that waged war to impose friendship would be impossible to negotiate with using traditional diplomatic methods.
Have there been any attempts at direct negotiation? Chancellor Yixera asked.
Several, Kethvar replied, activating yet another display. Every diplomatic mission sent to Earth has returned with the same report. The humans want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Council, and they're prepared to offer technologies and resources that would revolutionize galactic civilization.
What kind of technologies? Asked Representative Zilkorth with obvious interest.
Medical advancement that could extend lifespans for most species by 300 to 400%, Kethvar listed.
Industrial techniques that could increase resource efficiency by orders of magnitude. And, most remarkably, social technologies that could reduce or eliminate armed conflict between civilizations.
The chamber buzzed with excitement despite the serious nature of the discussion.
The potential benefits of human alliance were impossible to ignore. What do they want in return? Chancellor Yixera asked suspiciously.
Nothing, Kethvar replied. They offer these technologies freely to any species willing to engage in cultural exchange and maintain peaceful relations. Their only requirement is that recipient species agree not to use human-provided technology for aggressive purposes against other human allies.
That's actually reasonable, Representative Throck admitted reluctantly.
It's more than reasonable, Kethvar agreed.
It's the most generous first contact offer in recorded galactic history. Which brings us to the real problem.
Which is, if the Council rejects human diplomatic overtures, and they discover that we're actively preventing other species from accepting those same offers, their response would be devastating. Chancellor Yixera sat back in her seat, looking overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation.
Admiral, in your professional military assessment, what should the Council's response be to human expansion?
Kethvar straightened to his full height, his forearms clasping behind his back in formal presentation posture. Chancellor, honored representatives, based on comprehensive analysis of human capabilities, objectives, and methods, I recommend immediate establishment of formal diplomatic relations with Earth and integration into their alliance network. The chamber exploded in shocked voices.
Representatives spoke rapidly in dozens of languages while translation devices struggled to keep pace. You're recommending surrender? Representative Quell clicked frantically. I'm recommending victory, Kethvar replied firmly. The humans have created something unprecedented in galactic history, a method for achieving strategic objectives without warfare. They've demonstrated that cooperation produces better results than conquest. Fighting them would be like fighting the concept of peace itself. And if they become too powerful, asked Representative Zilkorth. Then, we'll be their friends, Kethvar said simply. And, based on observation of human behavior toward their friends, that's the safest place to be in the galaxy. The chamber fell silent as representatives contemplated the unprecedented recommendation.
Never in Council history had a military commander recommended alliance with a species that had just defeated 3 major invasion attempts.
But, as the implications became clear, many began to see the wisdom in Admiral Kethvar's assessment. Fighting humans had proven impossible. Containing them would require resources the galaxy couldn't spare.
But, joining them offered benefits beyond anything previously imagined.
Chancellor Yixera called for order one final time. The Council will recess to consider Admiral Kethvar's recommendations. All representatives will submit formal position statements within 48 standard hours.
As the session adjourned, representatives filed out in unusually quiet groups, many already engaged in animated discussions about the implications of formal alliance with Earth. The galaxy was about to change in ways no one had anticipated.
Admiral Kethvar remained at the podium, watching the chamber empty.
Despite everything, he found himself looking forward to meeting these remarkable humans in person. If the Council was wise, that meeting would happen sooner rather than later.
Because whether the galaxy liked it or not, humanity was coming.
And they were bringing friendship whether anyone wanted it or not.
2 weeks after Admiral Kethvar's shocking recommendation, the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives had spent days debating the unprecedented proposal to formally invite humanity into galactic civilization.
The arguments had been fierce, with traditional power blocks finding themselves divided in ways that defied centuries of established alliances.
Chancellor Yixera called the session to order with visible tension in her ethereal features.
The decision reached today would fundamentally alter the balance of galactic power, regardless of which direction the Council chose. Honorable representatives, she began, we convene today to vote on Resolution 2847, formal diplomatic recognition of humanity and invitation to join the Galactic Council as a probationary member species.
The voting chamber was more crowded than usual.
Word of the human situation had spread throughout Council space, and many species had sent additional observers to witness this historic decision. Even non-voting members had requested permission to attend, recognizing that the outcome would affect every civilization in known space.
Representative Quell clicked nervously from her section.
Chancellor, before we proceed to vote, I must raise a procedural concern.
State your concern.
We are voting on the admission of a species that has successfully resisted military action by 3 major galactic powers.
This sets a dangerous precedent for future contact protocols.
A murmur of agreement rippled through several sections of the chamber. The concern was valid. If resistance to galactic authority became a path to Council membership, other species might follow humanity's example.
Representative Throck rumbled his response. The precedent is already set. Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that make them impossible to ignore.
The question is whether we acknowledge this reality through diplomacy or continue pretending we can enforce traditional contact protocols.
The Dominion Empire formally objects to rewarding military resistance, announced Ambassador Crixtal, speaking for the first time during the human proceedings.
If we cannot maintain order among primitive species, our authority throughout the galaxy becomes meaningless.
Chancellor Yixera nodded respectfully.
Your concerns are noted, Ambassador.
However, I must point out that humanity can no longer be classified as primitive.
Their rapid technological advancement and alliance building demonstrate capabilities that exceed most Council member species. Capabilities gained through violation of contact protocols, Crixtal replied stiffly.
They destroyed a research vessel, then proceeded to establish unauthorized communication with multiple species. Such behavior should result in sanctions, not Council membership.
Representative Zilkortha's mechanical translator crackled as she responded.
Ambassador, with respect, sanctioning humanity is no longer a viable option.
They command alliance agreements with 46 species, many of whom would interpret sanctions against Earth as acts of aggression against themselves. The chamber buzzed with uncomfortable recognition of this truth. Humanity's social network had grown to the point where diplomatic action against Earth would effectively be diplomatic action against nearly half the galaxy's minor civilizations.
Which brings us to the real issue, interjected a new voice from the observer section. Ambassador Telvanni of the Nexus Collective stood, requesting permission to address the Council despite her non-voting status. Ambassador Telvanni, you may speak, Chancellor Yixera granted. The Nexus Collective has spent considerable time analyzing human expansion patterns, Telvanni began.
Our projections indicate that formal Council recognition of humanity is inevitable within the next 5 years, regardless of today's vote.
Explain these projections, requested Chancellor Yixera.
Human influence growth follows exponential curves that show no signs of slowing. Telvanni activated a holographic display showing galactic influence maps. Currently, they have direct alliance agreements with 46 species and cultural exchange programs with 73 others. At current expansion rates, they will have direct relationships with every spacefaring civilization within 8 years. The display showed influence projections spreading across the galaxy like a slow-moving wave. Traditional power centers appeared to shrink as human influence expanded, not through conquest but through voluntary association. More significantly, Telvanni continued, 18 Council member species have already established unauthorized diplomatic contact with humanity. Several have requested permission to formalize these relationships regardless of Council policy. This revelation caused an immediate uproar in the chamber. Unauthorized diplomatic contact was a serious violation of Council protocols, typically resulting in sanctions or suspension of membership privileges. Which species? Demanded Ambassador Crixtal angrily.
Chancellor Yixera consulted her official records.
That information is classified pending investigation of the unauthorized contacts.
However, I can confirm that the number is accurate.
The implication was clear, nearly 1/3 of Council member species had decided that relationships with humanity were more important than adherence to traditional diplomatic protocols.
The existing order was already fracturing. This merely reinforces the need for firm action, Crixtal declared. Species that violate contact protocols should face consequences, not rewards. If we formalize human council membership, we effectively endorse violation of our own laws. With respect, Ambassador, Representative Frock rumbled, our laws were written for a different galactic environment. Humanity represents something unprecedented in our experience.
Attempting to apply traditional protocols to an unprecedented situation may be counterproductive. Laws that change based on convenience are not laws at all, Crixtal replied sharply.
If we cannot enforce contact protocols with one primitive species, how can we maintain order throughout Council space?
The debate might have continued indefinitely, but it was interrupted by an unexpected announcement from the Council's communication center.
A technician approached Chancellor Yixera's podium with obvious urgency.
Chancellor, the technician said quietly, we're receiving a transmission from the human delegation. The chamber fell silent. No human delegation had been invited to Council space, and the implications of their presence suggested either a massive intelligence failure or deliberate human infiltration of the galaxy's most secure sector.
Human delegation? Chancellor Yixera asked carefully. A diplomatic vessel has just entered Council space and is requesting permission to address the Council, the technician reported.
They claim to have been invited by 18 member species and insist they have important information relevant to today's vote.
Ambassador Crixtal stood immediately. Absolutely not. Allowing unauthorized aliens to address the Council would be an unprecedented breach of security and protocol. However, Chancellor Yixera said thoughtfully, refusing to hear from the species we're debating would be equally unprecedented.
We are, after all, discussing their future membership in this body.
The procedural implications were staggering.
Never in Council history had the subject of a membership vote been present during deliberations. Traditional protocol required complete separation between applicant species and voting members to prevent intimidation or inappropriate influence. I propose a compromise, suggested Representative Zilkorth. We can receive their transmission without allowing physical presence in the chamber.
This maintains security while acknowledging their right to present their position.
After several minutes of heated procedural debate, the Council agreed to receive the human transmission. The main display activated, showing the interior of what appeared to be a modest spacecraft. 3 humans sat at a simple table, dressed in clothes that seemed deliberately unremarkable. Greetings, honorable members of the Galactic Council, said the woman in the center, speaking in flawless Council standard.
I am Ambassador Sarah Chun of the United Earth Government. Thank you for agreeing to hear our statement.
Her companions appeared to be a middle-aged man with graying hair and a younger woman taking notes on a simple electronic device. Nothing about their appearance or demeanor suggested the dangerous capabilities Admiral Kethvar had described.
Ambassador Chen, Chancellor Yixera replied formally, the Council recognizes your presence. Please state your purpose.
We come to formally request membership in the Galactic Council and to address concerns about human expansion that may be influencing your deliberations, Chen replied. We believe there may be misunderstandings about our objectives and methods that we can clarify.
Ambassador Crixtal leaned forward aggressively.
Your species violated first contact protocols, destroyed Council property, and resisted lawful authority.
What justification can you possibly offer for such behavior? Chen's expression remained calm and friendly. Ambassador, we appreciate your concern about protocol violations. However, we must respectfully point out that no Council representative ever attempted formal first contact with humanity. Our first interaction with galactic civilization occurred when an unidentified vessel began abducting our citizens for biological experimentation. The chamber erupted in shocked discussion. The research vessel incident had been classified as a routine biological survey, not an abduction operation. That vessel was conducting standard biological sampling, Crixtal protested. No intelligent life was detected on your world. Ambassador, Chen replied gently, the vessel abducted 47 humans from populated areas during daylight hours. Either your detection systems are seriously flawed, or the research was conducted without regard for our status as intelligent beings. Chancellor Yixera quickly consulted her records. Ambassador Chen, do you have evidence of these abductions? Chen nodded to her companion, who activated a holographic display. Security footage played showing a clearly alien vessel using tractor beams to capture humans from various locations on Earth. The footage was timestamped and included audio of terrified humans calling for help. The vessel's destruction was a defensive response to ongoing kidnapping operations, Chen explained. We attempted communication for 3 days before taking action. When communication failed, we defended our people. The implications silenced even Ambassador Crixtal.
If humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had been through unauthorized abduction of their citizens, their hostile response was not only understandable but legally justified under Council law. "Why did you not attempt to contact the Council directly?" asked Representative Quell, her clicking subdued. "We didn't know the Council existed," Chen replied simply. "Your research vessel provided no identification, responded to no communication attempts, and continued abducting our people. We had no way to know it represented a legitimate government rather than hostile aliens." The chamber buzzed with uncomfortable recognition that humanity's actions had been entirely reasonable given their limited information.
However, Chen continued, that unpleasant introduction to galactic civilization taught us something important about the galaxy's political structure. We learned that different species often act without coordinating with central authority, that communication failures can lead to tragic misunderstandings, and that assumptions about other species' capabilities can have serious consequences. "And this led to your expansion strategy?" asked Representative Throck. "It led to our prevention strategy," Chen corrected. "We realized that future misunderstandings could be avoided through direct communication and relationship building. Every species we've contacted has been approached with friendship specifically to prevent the kind of tragic miscommunication that started our relationship with galactic civilization." Ambassador Crixtal found his voice again. "Your expansion threatens the existing order of galactic politics." Chen smiled warmly. "Ambassador, we're not trying to replace existing political structures. We're trying to supplement them with social connections that make war unnecessary. The Galactic Council provides excellent governance for resource allocation and territorial disputes. Humanity offers social technologies that can prevent those disputes from becoming violent conflicts." "Social technologies?" Chancellor Yixera asked with genuine curiosity. "Methods for building emotional connections between different species," Chen explained. "Entertainment, cultural exchange, shared activities, and friendship establishment. When species genuinely like each other, they become much more motivated to resolve conflicts peacefully." "And if species refuse your friendship?" asked Ambassador Crixtal suspiciously. Chen's expression became serious. "Ambassador, we would never force friendship on anyone. However, we would defend our existing friends against aggressive action, and we would continue offering friendship to the aggressive species until they chose to accept it." "You would fight wars to impose peace?" Crixtal pressed. "We would fight wars to defend peace," Chen corrected. "There's an important difference. We don't start conflicts, but we will finish them if our friends are threatened." The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the implications. Humanity wasn't interested in conquest or dominance. They were building a defensive alliance based on genuine affection between species. But that alliance was becoming so large that challenging it would mean fighting most of the galaxy. "Ambassador Chen," Chancellor Yixera said carefully, "what exactly does humanity want from the Galactic Council?" Chen brightened immediately. "Formal diplomatic recognition, a seat at the table for major decisions affecting galactic civilization, and permission to continue our friendship-building activities with full legal protection. In exchange, we offer our social technologies, advanced medical and industrial techniques, and our commitment to peaceful conflict resolution for all Council members." "And if the Council rejects your request?" asked Representative Zilkorth. "Then, we'll continue doing exactly what we're already doing," Chen replied cheerfully. "Building friendships, preventing conflicts, and working toward a more peaceful galaxy. Council membership would make our work easier and more legitimate, but it's not required for us to continue." The honesty of the response was both refreshing and terrifying. Humanity would continue expanding their influence regardless of Council approval, but they would prefer to do it with official recognition. "We have one final presentation," Chen announced. "Something we think the Council should see before making their decision." The display changed to show a real-time view of space near Earth. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of species moved in coordinated patterns around massive space stations. The activity level was extraordinary, but what caught attention was the obvious happiness of the participants. "This is the first Galactic Friendship Festival," Chen explained proudly. "Representatives from 83 species are currently engaged in cultural exchange, entertainment sharing, and collaborative projects. No trade negotiations, no territorial discussions, no political maneuvering. Just beings from across the galaxy enjoying each other's company."
The footage showed impossible scenes, predator and prey species sharing meals together, ancient enemies collaborating on artistic projects, and traditionally hostile civilizations teaching each other their cultural dances.
This is what we're offering the galaxy, Shin said quietly.
Not conquest, not dominance, but the possibility that different species can genuinely enjoy each other's existence.
Chancellor Yixera watched the festival footage with obvious wonder. How many species have you contacted total?
147, Chen replied. We've established formal alliance agreements with 61, cultural exchange programs with 83 others, and we're in initial contact negotiations with the remaining 3. The numbers were staggering. In less than 3 years, humanity had contacted more species than most council members encountered in centuries of membership.
The vote will proceed as scheduled, Chancellor Yixera announced.
Thank you, Ambassador Chen, for your presentation.
Thank you for listening, Chen replied warmly.
Regardless of your decision, we look forward to building friendship with every member of the Galactic Council.
The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in contemplative silence.
The final vote was closer than expected but decisive, 187 votes in favor of human membership, 134 against, with 52 abstentions.
Humanity had been formally invited to join galactic civilization.
As representatives filed out of the chamber, most were already planning their own diplomatic missions to Earth. The galaxy was about to become a much friendlier place.
Whether it wanted to or not.